every week, a new startup promises to disrupt something. Payments, logistics, healthcare, education. But beneath the buzzwords, for most Africans, technology still feels distant. Millions remain offline. Data is expensive. Trust in digital systems, that's still fragile. Building a product is no longer the hard part, but getting people used to it, to believe in it, and to stay, that's where most founders fail. Mass adoption on the continent doesn't start with features or fundraising. It starts with understanding human behavior, why people save, spend, share, or simply ignore the next app that lands on their screen. In a world full of short attention spans, simplicity wins. In markets driven by memory and emotion, even a name, 2 or 3 syllables, can make or break recall. And in places where marketing budgets are small, word of mouth is the most powerful network effect there is. So what does it truly take to reach the masses? Well, we're about to find out. This episode is brought to you in partnership with Tanqueray Africa. Cocktails in hand, stories at the table, and a gentle reminder to drink responsibly after hours. Today, we're joined by Samuel Njuguna, CEO and co-founder of Chumz. Samuel's story starts in a rural village where his curiosity for technology took root, leading him to study computer science and then later venturing into entrepreneurship. From airtime distribution to alternative credit scoring and now fintech, Samuel has consistently focused on the nexus of tech and business impact. At Chumz, their mission is simple: to help ordinary people save, grow, and achieve their financial goals. So Samuel, imagine you're giving advice to a founder who's trying to build a product for mass market adoption. What's one piece of advice you'd give them?
I think what I would say is business operates in a space of opportunity. Technology is the tool you use to build and meet this opportunity. And then for the mass market, psychology is what you use to communicate to the masses and also to align to the masses. So traditionally what has always happened is, I think when building products, we focus largely on the tech bit and the business bit. But for mass market, I always highlight it's very key to have an approach around psychology, and has to do with how you understand people, whether in terms of how you position the product, how you communicate, or to make it easy to recall among a large number of people.
That's an interesting response. Psychology should be at the forefront of your thoughts as you're building for mass market adoption. So what would you say makes a product stick in people's minds?
So I think what makes a product stick, I would give this analogy that's always given of a vitamin and a painkiller. So the question is, what you're building, is it a painkiller or is it a vitamin? And as you know, with vitamins, if you forget to take them, nothing much happens. You don't feel any pain, you don't feel any pressure. But if you're having a headache, that's a pain. You need a painkiller and you need to solve for that. So when you have a pain and you're looking for a painkiller, it's urgent, it's immediate, it's at the top of mind. For a vitamin, it's something that you can easily forget. So the short of it is, when you're building a solution, make sure what you're building is a painkiller, or what you're offering is a painkiller as opposed to a vitamin. That means it's an actual need.
So you're saying that first you need to solve a real problem for it to even be get into the realm of
Correct.
Mass adoption.
Yes.
What are some of the overlooked things that as well are involved in that psychology of a painkiller when you're building?
I think the things that I've seen most of the builders or techpreneurs miss out is on the learning curve to find out whether what you're building is or what you're offering is a painkiller. And the first thing that comes to mind when people hear of building a solution always has to do with a solution you have in mind.
Yes. And
that is what essentially you think should be the solution for whatever problem that you have seen people experiencing. But the way I view that is view it as a learning curve. So start off with a number of hypotheses. You say, I see people having this issue. I think solution A would work. If not, I can have a solution B. Then using either a questionnaire or a prototype, engage the people you intend to give the solution to, and then see their reaction. And their reaction has to come in 2 ways. One, in terms of engaging with them verbally, and also has to do with non-verbal communication, body language. A case in point, if what you're building or what you're offering is a painkiller, then you expect to see a certain reaction when someone sees that solution. It's one thing just to say, I think it's a good solution. It's another thing to say, I think this will work for me.
What I'm struggling to put together with your response is that a lot of people who are building think that they are solving for a painkiller. People create hypotheses to back whatever beliefs that they have. And so you can have a bias towards a belief and you find justifications for that belief, which then you go with and go all in, because as a founder, you're also taught to sort of have that conviction, and sometimes you will be wrong, sometimes you're right, but trust in your intuition. So how do you balance that need for making sure that this is a painkiller versus the bias that can come with me thinking that I am in fact doing this, and that could very well not be the case?
I think the bias should be towards the learning bit. So let's say you have identified a problem, and clearly there's a problem that exists in that space. Then the question that you have is the problem that I have in mind, the solution that I have in mind, the perfect solution for this problem? And solutions come in different flavors. So the bias towards learning is you'll have a certain number of approaches or hypotheses on how to solve for that problem.
Yes.
So the bias in that case should be towards the learning bit, as opposed to being hell-bent and being very confident on your first approach or your first solution, that it's basically the key solution for the problem you have identified.
So what you're saying is that part of this building or scaling for mass market is trial and error, and being open to that and chasing that until you find what's a good fit, rather than sticking to that idea from start to finish.
I would say informed trial and error. Again, there's no need to do your own original mistakes in this space. There are books that have been written around how to build for such products, how to research around such products, build on that knowledge, and then after that, that's when you can do your own original mistake backed with the knowledge that you have.
Building for Africa's mass market is about behavior, not just bandwidth. Research shows that simplicity drives adoption short, memorable names outperform complex ones, and products with viral network effects spread faster than those reliant on paid acquisition. According to GSMA, over 60% of mobile users in sub-Saharan Africa are still on 2G or 3G connections, which means lightweight, easy-to-navigate apps remain essential. At the same time, consumer psychology matters. Trust, ease of recall, and even the color or sound of a brand can influence retention. I want to bring in the conversation of B2B versus B2C, because those are two different games. And what I've seen from my experience working within this industry is that people find it easier to build solutions for B2B as opposed to B2C. Obviously, because you have to attract significantly a bigger amount of traction when you're building for B2C versus B2B. And we also see a lot of African startups not succeeding in building for B2C. However, you've been involved working at Chumz, and you also mentioned your previous experience, which was B2B or B2C. Maybe you can confirm
B2B.
for me. Yeah. So with your experience building both for B2B and B2C, you're currently still running, and I would presume that Chumz is also going seamlessly. What are some of the nuances involved? And would you say that it's harder? What are some of the challenges that you are anticipating when you're building for mass market adoption and expectations?
There's no one that you can say is better than the other. They're both catering to given problems. But then the way the market is structured, you find the market favors some of the solution. For example, I think in one of the things that investors normally say is that it's very hard to fund B2C because of the cost of marketing, cost of making the solution known as compared to B2B. The other thing is B2C usually has very thin margins, so you need to get to a critical mass to make money as compared to B2B. I would go a step further and actually add another category that we call B2G. That is business to government, which is even in terms of the sales cycle is even longer than the B2B. So B2B would have people internally discussing whether they are going to take up your solution. You would give it time before they come to a conclusion. Then on the far end, you'd have governments, whose second name is bureaucracy in terms of the game. And they do take time as well. You'd have one government taking a contract, a big contract, but then before you close that, it takes a while.
Yes.
So the short of it is each has its own advantages, B2C, B2B, B2G, but then there are nuances that you need to consider for each.
Yes.
B2C, marketing, very heavy marketing costs, because you have to reach the masses. But then the key thing around that is you have to look for ways to counter those marketing costs. And the example I always give for a good B2C example is WhatsApp. You've never seen a billboard for WhatsApp in Kenya. But then the reason why it has worked is because by design, WhatsApp really works very well with network effects. I'll invite you. They are very clear when you add the contact list and someone is not on WhatsApp, they tell you to invite the person, you know. Right now there's also FOMO. If you're not in a WhatsApp group, you feel like you're missing out.
Are you?
Yeah, I always give that example.
Me, I don't feel FOMO.
I can give you an example of my uncle in the village.
Yes.
Where there was this group where, you know, they are village mates and, you know, they're discussing what's happening around the village. It's their means of communication, whether it's cows are getting vaccinated or there's something new that's development that's happening. There are people who are visiting for one reason or the other in the village.
Yes.
And because of feeling like you're missing out on that, you find they also want to buy a smartphone, specifically to be on WhatsApp.
Yes.
So in that case, then the way to counter heavy marketing cost on B2C would be what we term as a product-led marketing kind of solution. Example is WhatsApp. For B2B, I think the key thing is on the long sales cycle, relatively longer than compared to a B2C. Marketing is not as heavy relative to B2C, but then again, you'd have to get or be sure there are a number of companies who are going to consume your product to make a case for it to be relevant in the market or for it to scale. Then on the other hand, you have B2G. B2G has its own issues in terms of, especially when we talk about our continent, whether it's making sure that the deals you're getting are clean deals. You know, there are no people who are trying to get shortcuts for you to engage with you. It's very clean, very open, and also being cognizant, it also has a longer sales cycle as compared to all the other two. But then again, its advantages is if you get it right, then you get the big money from just a single client. Yes.
Would you, I mean, in your personal opinion, was it easier for you to build for B2B than B2C? And aside from marketing, what are some other bottlenecks? Because I mean, we live in a capitalistic world. At the end of the day, I'm trying to see, am I going to make profits? Are my chances of success higher or significantly lower if I'm trying to build for mass adoption versus when I'm B2B or B2G? I want you to get a bit deeper into what it actually means to decide that I'm going to build for mass market as opposed to I'm going to build for a business or a government institution.
So, to tell you, I was very analytical on which one I was going to build. I would be lying to you. In actual sense, the approach personally that I took was something that I was passionate about. And then you're like, I'll try and figure it out as you go. The first point of departure was we had seen there's an issue with savings. People are struggling with savings. You'd find even ourselves would get money, but then mid-month, you're wondering why is there a longer month than the money that you had? The question was then, what do we do about it? And we realize because of how you're spending, how you're handling money, there's no way to save. So the short of it, the way we approached it, it wasn't very analytical. It was identifying a problem. And the first thing we did was we did a Google Sheet where we shared a number of questions and we shared with our close friends. And you're like, do you also struggle with this same problem? It's something you're experiencing, but you wanted to know whether it's just us, is it biased towards us, or it's something common? And they're like, yeah, this is something we experience on a day-to-day basis. And then what we did after that, we extended the research to outside our friends, people we don't know. So maybe friends of our friends of our friends.
Yes.
And from the feedback we got, we are like, I think there's something here. This is a big issue. The next question was, how can we solve for this? And this ties to what I mentioned to you earlier around hypotheses. So we had a number of hypotheses and how the solution would look like. In between having the first prototype and like the fifth, they were very different. So we were very clear there's a problem. But the question was, is the tool that we have the solution?
The solution.
They say when you have a hammer, all problems are nails. But now in this case, you need the screwdrivers, the hammers, all manner of tools, and then you see which one is the perfect fit for this problem. Yeah, so the short of it is, we identified the problem, we were passionate about solving for that problem, and then along the way, we would see how to be creative around the financial modeling bit of it.
I think this might feed into what you said earlier in your principles of belief of focusing on the solving the problem first than thinking of the other factors, like is this going to be adaptable? Are people going to use the solution? But more focused on how to solve a big problem, or what did you say? What's the analogy you used the first time? The
vitamin and the painkiller, yeah.
And the painkiller. And so I do appreciate that. I do think that a lot of people know that internally, but when you come on the ground, because, and I think, Samuel, this is very important, because mentally, or all the advice you will get tells you that you should focus on a particular problem and solve for it, and then figure out, is it going to be B to B, is it going to be B to C afterwards, all those other nuances. However, when you're on the ground, you have other challenges such as financial constraints. You might have challenges as, you can't do this by yourself, perhaps I need a co-founder, maybe I don't have one. And so I'm trying to, it puts some people in a situation where that, yes, you're trying to focus on these solutions, however, what it takes to actually make that solution from the position they're in might not be as directly practical. Would you say that is an assumption, or is that real? And if that is real, then what is a pivot, or how to go about that kind of a conundrum?
So there's a truism, I call it a truism, that says when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And basically it talks about when you take the first few steps, you'll find people who are going to accommodate you in your journey. And the analogy I also give around that is, think of yourself, if you were to meet, for example, someone like Albert Einstein, and you are in class 1, probably what you'd ask him is, what is 1 + 1 or 2 + 2? And he'll still give you an answer. But if you have gone a mile ahead, a few steps, and you understand all these deeper physics, right?
Yes.
The theory of relativity, then if you ask him that, you'll still get an answer from the same person, but maybe in the second stance you might get more value because you're more knowledgeable in the space and he's more knowledgeable, so he'll give you more answers or more material to the kind of question you had. So the way I see it is, initially when you're starting, there's always this sense that you need to have everything intact. The team, the financial model needs to be in place. But remember, problem solving is more of a creative approach and less of a logical or a very rational kind of construct. So what happens is you start the first steps, and then along the way, based on the needs, you will realize the kind of people you need. Whether it's in terms of the team, whether it's in terms of how the solution needs to be structured for it to survive, or whether it's where you need to place it, where you need to start in terms of marketing. But the first step is to take the first baby steps. And then along the way, you'll find the capacity to fill in these puzzles. But otherwise, if you lean back and you're like, I need to get all these things right before I start, you'll never start. So the way I view it is, just see a point of departure, and then along the way go, progress as you fill in the pieces.
You just gotta have to trust the process.
Yes, yeah, trust the process.
Okay, well, that feeds into my next question of simplicity over complexity. I think one of the things that you've mentioned before is that simplicity is something that can be a valuable asset when you're building, especially for the kind of market that we are looking for, which is mass. How would you say you can resist the urge to overbuild?
The funny thing is, they usually say, there's a quote that says, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So I think anyone can add more features, more materials to something. It takes effort to make the thing just focus on one thing. So going back to your question on simplicity versus complexity, the way to view it is, if you're competing on a real estate, and I view user's mind as a real estate, the user has so many distractions or so many things that are competing for their attention. Then the next question that comes in is then, how do they give whatever I'm offering the key attention or the key focus? And the way to do that is make sure whatever product you're building does one thing and does it very well.
Yes.
The other alternative, because Chumz is a savings and investment app, the other alternative would have been, okay, people are doing savings, why don't we layer lending, why don't we layer insurance, why don't we layer a myriad of investment options, why don't we layer payments? But then what does that do? If you were to go to a client, a potential client, and ask them, what does this product do? If it does so many things, in their real estate or in their mind, it becomes very hard for them to define it. And if the user doesn't define a solution in a given, or place it in a certain category, then you've already lost the client. So the way to go about it is do one thing and do it very well. So if a user is asked, which app can I use for savings and investment? Guys will tell you, Chumz. Because that's what we do. Then down the line, once you get the critical mass, or when people know you for a certain offering, then you can decide to layer extra features to enhance what you initially offered. And the example I also give is on, for example, WhatsApp. WhatsApp can be many things.
Yes.
With their size and the things that they do, it's very easy to layer things like payments.
Yes.
Because that's where people are. But then why is it that they haven't done that? It's because they want to be known for messaging. If they're going to do payments, that can be done down the line or in other markets where they feel they have gotten to critical mass. So the short of it, the comparison or the consideration around simplicity versus complexity, if you're building a product for the mass market, make sure it's very easy to define. The users can give it a specific category. And then once you do that, once you get to the critical mass, you can layer other
features,
other offerings. Yes. So the biggest issue, in short, I've always seen is ramping up so many things. You want this to be a super app initially. So it becomes very hard for a user just to define what it does well. It's like a car that has been built like a lorry, a pickup, a motorbike, a tuk-tuk. If you wanted to buy a pickup, where would you place that? It becomes very hard to define it. Yeah, so, but if you do one thing and you do it very well, Toyota has the option of building a 3-in-1. Like they can build something that is a lorry, can be a pickup, can be a personal car, but why is it that they have all these variants for each category? Because they want the user, if a user is looking for a pickup, they know the pickup to go for. If they want the user to go for an off-road personal car, they know which car to go for. So, and I can give you another example, because this is something I'm also very passionate about. It's if you go to, if you check companies like Unilever and P&G,
yes,
they have a myriad, thousands and thousands of products.
Yes.
But you never hear them saying this P&G, always P&G, Gillette, P&G. No, the company name takes a back seat and the product itself becomes very prominent. You hear the product is called Gillette. In fact, I'm pretty sure a lot of people get shocked when they realize one company has all these products.
Yes.
But what they do is they let one product is Gillette. It's a men's product, hair product for shaving. So let it stand on that category. So in the user's mind, if you're asked, what brand should I look for shaving? Gillette comes to mind. But if you say P&G, that's so many things, which means it's very hard for a user to define where a given product sits in the user's mind.
So what you're saying is the compromise, if you want to build multiple products, then you have to have personal identities for each of them, if you really have to do that.
Correct.
Okay.
Or you have to have a roadmap where you start with one and then get to a certain critical mass, introduce another, like that.
I would say, I see this in fintech, people trying to build super apps or marketplaces of some sort. But I don't know if this is a good use case scenario, a platform like Wise. which is considered somewhat a super app, right? I mean, M-Pesa on the alternative, they started as a remittance, P2P payment solution. However, right now they've introduced other things, which is a perfect description of what you've described. However, when I look at people like Wise who have this, I mean, I think that their anchor is cross-border remittance.
And that was their foundation.
And that was
their foundation was cross-border. If you read their story and how it came about was because of someone who realized, I think it was one of the founders, actually one of the founders, initial founders of Skype. He realized whenever they would have to send money to their friends, they would have to incur a lot of costs.
Yes.
And it's just within Europe. So the question was, then why don't we create a platform that can do cross-border remittance at a very low cost?
Yes.
So that was the genesis, and that's what they focused on for a very long time.
For a very long time.
And then once you hit what you term as a market maturity, on that graph where it plateaus, you're no longer acquiring new users, or to acquire new users, it costs you an arm and a leg in terms of user acquisition cost.
Yes.
Then at that point you decide we have saturated the market, then maybe we can layer other services to existing clients. They already with us, they already trust the brand. So even if we layer another solution or another feature, they'll be very likely to utilize that.
So to close up this part of the conversation, if I have multiple ideas and I'm trying to scale, and I might have this theory that I need to try do at least like 3 different things to see what's gonna fit, as opposed, that is not a good approach, as opposed to saying, okay, out of these 3, this is what I'm gonna start with and see if I need to then give this at the time instead of starting all at the same time.
So if those are different features and they're catering to different problems, you can have 3 hypotheses. Remember what we've talked about hypotheses?
Yes.
Test them out with the target client. You might find those features that, or the solution you're trying to build, they have an overlap. They might be catering to the same client, and that client might have a priority on which is the most pressing need. Or if you dig deeper, you might find those 3 features cater to a very different crowd or to a very different segment. Then it makes sense for you to run hypotheses across the 3 segments and see which one resonates the most, or feels like what you've built for them is a painkiller among those 3 hypotheses. And then that can be a way of prioritizing now which problem you're going to tackle.
Okay. I want to take this conversation back home to your interest in psychology. Why your interest in psychology, and why do you think it's super important for people to consider that as they're building, especially for mass market adoption?
I think psychology has to do with, it speaks to people. It's the way people relate to each other. It's the way people relate to products. You have to relate to whatever space they are in. The way, for me personally, the way I got interested in psychology was something that I took up. And my journey started off, as much as I started as a technical guy, my background in tech, I went into sales. And if there's one thing that shocks you, is sales. No matter how good your product is, as long as people can't relate to it or they don't see the value in it, no one is going to buy.
Yes.
So going a layer deep into that research, I ended up in psychology. Sales ultimately lands you in psychology. Because it has to do with how you position, how do you position the message?
Absolutely.
How do you craft a good copy?
Yeah.
How do you touch on the user's benefits, not just on the features of the product? Purely psychology. Down that rabbit hole, we ended up, my co-founder called Njogu is also a big fan of psychology. We ended up on a new field of psychology called behavioral psychology or behavioral economics.
Yes.
And this was a new field that was coming in to supplement or complement the classical economics. And just to give you an idea of how interesting psychology is, and psychology, behavioral psychology. So traditionally, if you ask an economist whether I give you maybe a green pair of socks or I give you 5,000, an economist will say you're more likely to take the 5,000 because you're going to maximize your utility. With the 5,000, you might do other things. Maybe you don't even wear socks.
Yes.
But now the psychologist comes in and says, or the behavioral psychologist comes in and says, look, yes, you may not like the socks. What about, or what if the pair of socks was given to you by your grandmother.
That's different.
That's different, right? So it means you might have now weight on the socks because of an emotional attachment. And that's what now psychology does. It fills in things and it recognizes that people are not very rational. They're not logical. We are creatures of feelings, emotions. There are things that sway us into doing certain things. For example, you could have been given 1,000. An economist will say with the 1,000 you should go and invest it. But then as you walk along the street, you find someone who's hungry and you decide to give them the 1,000.
Yes.
Right?
Of course.
So the whole idea behind psychology and our point of departure on that was then how does psychology fit in most of these things? And when we started building the savings and investment app Chumz, then one of the things we realized for us to enable people to move from a point of intention and action, intention being you have an intention to save and actually saving, that habit gap was using behavioral psychology. So what we did was a lot of behavioral psychology and gamification. Let me take you back to a way behavioral psychology works for us, but people have never thought about it. So if you look at the ways us in African setting, we always save. We have always saved the most when we come together as a group.
Yes.
If you go to behavioral psychology, they tell you why that works is because there's a social function. We nudge each other. It becomes fun for you to now contribute because it's not just about the numbers. And then when you don't contribute, you feel like you're dropping the ball or letting the team down in terms of contribution.
Yes.
So ultimately what that does, it leads to more savings. Another similar space where people are encouraged to do work together is when you're going to the gym. They say if you want to make it easier, go with friends.
That is the one theory that I'm yet to subscribe to. I find it quite difficult going for group gym classes as opposed to working out myself. But I understand the rationale.
Not just group, but going with friends.
Going with friends.
Yes, going with friends.
Yes.
So you can also look at things like hiking. They become easier and more fun when you do this
hiking,
with friends. Yes. It's very different from just going and meeting random people in the gym, and you're trying to align with them on the exercise. So the whole aspect of behavioral aspects is, for example, for savings for us, was how can we use behavioral aspects to drive savings? So some of the things when you go into psychology, you learn about things are like cognitive load. If you can reduce the amount of thinking that people have to do when they are saving or when they're making a decision, then it becomes easier for them to do a decision. So one of the things we do as Chumz is, for example, if you pay in a pub, we'll tell you to save some of the money in your account. Obviously, it's a bit of guilt tripping on a behavioral aspect because you're having this nice drink and you're telling you to save. Other things we do is when you receive money, we'll tell you to save some of the money. So the whole idea behind that is that's one bit of psychology. The other one on the mass market product is a name needs to be, the name of the brand or the name you give the brand needs to be very easy to recall. Going back to the cognitive load, if people are taking time to think about your product, you have already lost them. Remember, you are in a space where there are a lot of competing interests. So what is it about the name? There's a time I did a deep dive into naming brands, funny enough, and it goes squarely into psychology. They tell you, if you want to name an online platform, they advocate for a duo or a trisyllable.
Wow.
So that's why you have a name like Facebook, Gmail, Twitter, Yahoo. All those are duo. If it extends, it's trisyllable.
Yes.
So how does this work? It's because the way the mind works, it tries, number one, to remember very short names. And if a name is very long, the mind tries and shorten it. It's the reason why you'd have a name like karaoke be shortened to Caris. Right?
People are calling karaoke's Caris.
Yes, in short. Or someone like New York, you say NY.
It's true.
Right? If it's someone called Wanjiro, you say Shiro.
Okay, yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So what the mind is doing is that it's shortening that for easier recall.
Apple might Tanqueray Africa. We may have missed the psychology bit of naming, except we added tech in the name. Would you say that is a good name recall, for example?
Sorry?
For my Tanqueray Africa.
Oh, okay.
I may have missed that masterclass.
I think what would be interesting is to find out how people shorten this when they are referring to
MTSA and MTS Africa.
Yes,
is how
correct. Because
yes.
definitely there's a way people shorten the names. So what you find, and there's a very interesting video about naming, which I'll also share There's a guy who does naming in Silicon Valley, and that's all he does. It's if you can be able to have a name that is easier to recall, and it can even be radical. It's so radical that we have seen, for example, names like Google, whereby the name doesn't mean anything, but the brand gives value to the name.
Yes.
But the name itself is very easy to recall. So how does this tie? Again, if you're building for the masses, make sure the name is very easy to recall. And the other thing is make sure the name is not confusing. I'll just give a name like Mateo as an example. When you tell someone my name is Mateo, the first thing they'll ask you is Mateo with a single T, with a double T, with a Y? So you also introduce a cognitive load on the user side. So also look for a name that if I was to tell you the name, you won't have to think twice about how to write it down.
Yes.
Yeah, or how to phrase it. So that's on the naming, and it's part of the psychology. Other things to do with psychology has to do with how do you make the product very easy to be communicated through word of mouth, right? We said with B2C, the cost of marketing is very high because for it to make sense, you have to communicate it to a very large number of people, and the unit economics are very thin in terms of how much you make per person. So then, for that to work, you have to appeal also to their psyche, so that they enhance a word of mouth or share the product with other people. So how do you do that? You can borrow from apps like WhatsApp, whereby by design, it's focused on having people on board or sharing about the app. If we look at the example of the brand you mentioned, the mobile money providers, their key value prop is on the network.
Yes.
The fact that I have this line makes it very hard for me to switch to another line. There's a cost of switching. But also, if 5 people know this is my line, I stick to it a lot. It's
difficult to switch that.
Yes, and that's a psychology side of it. It might have been something they did deliberately, or it might have been something that came about.
People do things intentionally.
Yeah, that came about when they were building. They didn't expect it, but it took hold.
Nice.
And I think something interesting about that I saw in Europe, Apple has started introducing its own eSIM cards.
Wow.
And the question was then, what does it mean for the telcos? Because now that stickiness is no longer there because the entity is introducing its own eSIM.
That's quite an
and you can switch
challenge.
Across any network. So psychology cuts across board. Also has to do with the way you do your copy. For us, the other thing we did that we were very deliberate was saving has always been seen as something you do on a Monday morning, 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. You're looking at how much money you spent over the weekend. You went out, you had fun, and you're sulking because you spent a lot. So there's that view where saving is viewed as a very dull thing. So for us, on a behavioral aspect or psychology aspect, we try to make it fun and associate it with fun. So if you look at Chumz as it is, we have very flamboyant choice of colors.
Yes.
We have the pink, we have the
green,
the mustards, we have the greens, the lime greens. It pops. And the idea was it's something that can relate to the youth. It's youthful, it's fun, and it's interesting. And I can tell you one of our best performing video that we have been running on social media was a video that accidentally I was talking about change of color on the app and changing to mustard to very colorful choice of colors. Yeah, and you'd think that's something that wouldn't resonate with the people. People would like to hear about how fast we are. You can do a transaction in a millisecond. I think above and beyond those, people also relate to products as people.
Yes.
They want to see those interesting features.
Your logo is actually, I'm looking at the logo right now, and was it like the pig yellow thing? It's quite captivating when you look at it.
Thanks.
Yes. No, thank you so much. I think that's really valuable insights on psychology. I think when I did my degree in communications, it was quite important for us to do we did a lot of philosophical courses. We did behavioral communications or psychology as a course in itself. And being on the other side of actually pursuing a career within that field, you 100% think about those things. Even you asked me, how should I dress for this interview? How do people resonate with that? We think about how we set the table, who we're talking to, what is the setup, you know, wider space or lower angles. And so those are so many things that, I mean, in marketing and communications, you are taught to really consider. And I think it would be really, really helpful for people who are building, not only for mass market, but products in general, to really think about how they can then use psychology for their own benefit in whatever capacity. The last question I have for you is, you also mentioned that there's one goal that you have that is very specific, and that is building a school for underprivileged girls in rural communities. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
My key task when all is done, building this journey, it's also doing another building, but building for a school for the less privileged, and mostly girls, or rather focused on girls in slums and in remote areas. Basically people in the underprivileged spaces. And the reason why that resonates with me is because part of, again, psychology and the research I've been doing around poverty eradication talks about what it means if you lift the girl child out of poverty.
Yes.
Yeah, and out of that, it has taken me through a journey of research, trying to see, you can think of it in terms of behavioral aspects as well, and psychology. Yes. If someone is coming from an area, maybe they are very oppressed or suppressed, how would you design a school for them? And you can be sure it can't be a normal school. You'd have maybe a department to do with psychology, you know, a department maybe to teach them certain things.
Life skills.
Maybe in certain settings, people introduced to sex very early when they're very young, when they're in primary,
yes,
which is very different from a school of normal school-going kids where they're not exposed to those. Yeah. Then it would mean things like sex education would have to be introduced very early.
Yes.
If people are in a space where there are early marriages, right, or FGM, then you can be sure the school needs to be designed. You know, design thinking. It needs to be designed to cater for that. Yeah, so that's my end goal in all this. It also keeps me grounded in the journey that I'm in, and I see this building as even building these startups as a means to that, and then going to that. And I always take a point of sharing that, because you never know, you know, the people who have a shared vision and who reach out and say, I think this is a noble discussion. Have you ever looked at this in this angle?
Yes.
And even refining this idea, initially I thought I would say I'm building a secondary school for girls in underprivileged areas. Then someone corrected me and told me some of these girls are exposed to these extremes when they're very young in primary school. So you need to support them from that phase. Yeah, so that's my grand goal. Obvious for Chumz right now, we are looking to expand into 10 countries in the next 2 years. Wow. We are live in Rwanda, where the uptake has been good. We are looking now to go live in Uganda, in Tanzania, and Botswana. So yeah, so that's the journey.
Markets in particular?
So why those markets in particular? So for example, like Uganda, we have had a huge waiting list for people who have asked whether we can establish there. Culturally, it's also very close to Kenya. Culture is also a function of distance. So again, mass market products. So the closer a country is to your country, more often than not, you find culture is very close here. So by us being here, I think we have a huge, over 100, 200 plus people who have reached out from Uganda saying, we'd like to have this in our country. In Rwanda, Rwanda has been very conducive in terms of fintech environment, even in regulation. Nice. They've been very accommodating for fintechs. So when we started this, we engaged with people there. They said, yeah, look, we can accommodate you to set up this. The regulator was very open. Again, part of Chumz is what we call market deepening, the fact that we are doing financial inclusion in the very sense of that. So we were invited to set up there, and it's also been a good market. For Botswana, there's a company looking to white label a solution there. And then for Tanzania, we also reached out to the regulator. They thought it's an interesting project, and they've been very open to have us in the country.
Wow, that is a conversation that a lot of fintech people don't have positive conversations about. So I'm wishing you and the team the absolute best. I think the people from the Chumz team has been good friends of my Tanqueray Africa, from also having events and admin access, which you should be tuning into as one of our My Tanqueray Africa products, and now having you on board. We also had Patricia Ngade here, and so I'm wishing you guys nothing but the best. And thank you so much for coming into this interview. I think it's been a lovely conversation.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
And people to download Chumz.
Yes, I was going to ask you, where should people find you and where should people download Chumz? What are some of the things you want to leave our audience with?
Yeah, so go ahead, download the app. We allow people to save as low as 5 shillings, meaning it's all inclusive no matter how much money you have. It uses a lot of behavioral aspects. It will be reminding you to save based on how you're spending your money. You can create personal goals, group goals. Yeah, and you can find it on Play Store, App Store. I'm excited about this. And if you are from another different country, let us know. You go to the website, it will give you a page where you can indicate the country you are in, and we are very happy to see how we can accommodate you on the platform.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. If you've made it this far, make sure that you're subscribed. If you haven't already, subscribe and follow us on our social media platforms at My Tanqueray Africa, and check out our website, Made with Love, at mtsafrica.co. My name is Alice Kanchecho, and I shall see you in the next one. Bye.